Today is September 18th, 1998, and representing the Densho Project is Alice Ito and myself, Beth Kawahara. And we're very pleased to be here today with Shigeko, Sese, Uno. So Shigeko, could you start by telling us a little bit about your father, his life in Japan, how he got over here to America?
All right. My father's name, Eiji Sese, lived in Detour. He was the oldest son of a farmer, but I guess he didn't like farming, and also the Russo-Japanese War was going on, and he didn't want to be drafted into the Japanese army either. So a group of his friends and himself, he decided to come to America. That was a goal. Detour is on the Japan seaside, the other side of Honshu, so they had to walk over, no transportation. They walked over the mountains that divided Honshu and came into the seaport. Could have been Hiroshima. They jumped on the first boat they thought was destined for America, but when they landed, it was in Mexico. And so they realized they're in Mexico, and they traveled all the way over the border. They sneaked in. Someone took the attention of the customs officer or whatever, immigration people. And so they were able to slip in, and they found their way up to Seattle. He's never told me about any of the visits in other California cities or Oregon, but anyway, their destination was Seattle, and that's how they got here.
And on their trip northward, did they just take odds and ends of jobs, or?
Well, I have asked him, and the only thing he would say, he did mention, was having a job in Mexico, digging graves. I guess they did that. But the rest of the trip he has never mentioned. And it's too bad. We never thought of asking our father for details.
And so once he was here in Seattle, did he stay and establish a business at that time?
No. When he landed, he worked at various jobs, working in a restaurant, not as a cook, but just a helper, I think. Worked in a hotel, cleaning and all that. He said that sometimes he would have 3 jobs a day. Earned enough money, so he went back to Japan so he could legally come back to America, and also got married to my mother. My mother was a daughter of a Zen Buddhist priest, and so she was raised in the Buddhist temple. But they also happened to be next door to my father's farm. So they knew each other, and they got married in Japan, and my mother and father came to Seattle, I imagine about the first part of, around 1910, something like that, because I was born 1915 in the International District.
Where exactly was that in the International District?
Where?
Yeah, that you were born. Where was your first home that you remember?
Oh, it was on 7th Avenue South between Maine and Washington. And I remember that home because I fell off of the second floor window.
Excuse me, you fell off the second floor window when you were just a little baby?
No, I was able to walk, but this house was a long house. What do you call it? Different families lived, and it was on a hill. 7th Avenue is a hill between Maine and Washington. And my mother tells me that I was looking out of the window while she was vacuuming the living room. All of a sudden, I wasn't there. She looked below, and there I was, 2 stories down. We lived upstairs.
You were always an active person then, even at that young age.
So.
And subsequently, did you have other brothers?
Yes, I had a brother, Masa, that was born in 1917. Another brother, Tosh, 1918. Another brother, George, born in 1920, and the last one, Kaoru, 1922.
Mm-hmm. So you were the eldest, and you had a house full of brothers
yes.
as well.
And that's why my father decided to start a dairy, because he knew that milk and dairy products were good for children, and since he had so many, he invested in the White River Dairy, which had already been started by a group of people that had come from Japan, but they couldn't make a go of it, so my father bought them out and bought this plant. People ask me, how did you like milking the cows? Well, I never saw a cow. You know, our milk was brought in from the White River Valley in a refrigerated truck, and then all we did was pasteurize, bottled, and delivered to restaurants and grocery stores. Mm-hmm. Because before war, there were quite a few Japanese restaurants and grocery stores.
And where was the dairy located then?
Oh, it's on Weller Street right now. The address was 813 Weller Street.
Mm-hmm. Here's a picture of the dairy. Could you kind of tell us a little bit about it?
Yes. There were quite a few dairy farmers in the White River Valley, Japanese, that had cows, and so that's why, since our milk came from the Japanese dairy farmers, he named it White River Dairy. Mm-hmm. Here it is, White River Dairy. Mm-hmm. And this is taken in 1938, so the trucks are quite old here, but I do remember we had all new trucks at the time we evacuated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you had a number of trucks, which means that the business was really thriving at that time.
7 trucks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. As you reflect back growing up, how did you have to help out at the dairy, or when you were younger, how did you go to, did your mother take care of all of you, or did you go to a nearby daycare, or was there such a thing at that time?
Well, I remember when we were still living on 7th Avenue South, one day a white lady came. Well, I had never seen one, because we lived among the Japanese only in the middle of Japantown at that time. And here appeared a white lady that said, "Do you have any children here who would like to go to day school, nursery school or kindergarten?" So my mother was so happy because she had 5 of us at that time. The Japanese Baptist Church was just kitty corner then on Washington Street between our place and the Nippon. And this lady turned out to be a graduate of the Baptist Missionary Training School in Chicago, and her first missionary field was with the Japanese. So she was going to start this nursery school, and we all went. Mm-hmm. And I remember too, holding on to her hands while she went up and down Japantown, way down to Jackson Street, to King Street. There were people still living on Dearborn, way down at Dearborn. She gathered up these children and would take all of them to the nursery school. And so that's how, despite the fact that my mother was a Zen Buddhist priest's daughter and a Buddhist, so was my father. They're very happy that the Japanese Baptist Church was going to take care of their children. Mm-hmm. Right. So that's how I became a Baptist. Yeah. People often ask me, well,
right.
And the church has meant a lot to me. They've guided my life and helped me.
And as we get further into your life, we'll hear more about, the activities and how you participated in the church. Mm-hmm. So as you continue to grow up then, you had said in an earlier chat that your mother had returned to Japan for a short while. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Oh, yes. Right after the Tokyo earthquake, it was a timing. And the reason why I acted the way I did was my father and mother always said that the children would be sent to Japan for a real good education. They felt that Japan could offer a good education for the children. So my poor brothers who were under me and couldn't protest, they went with my mother while I stayed behind because I refused to go to Japan. And having read about that big earthquake in Tokyo, well, I decided I wasn't going to go where it was so dangerous. Mm-hmm. But the thing is, so my father had to take care of me, and he couldn't do it because he's working. My sister, I had a sister I forgot to mention, who came from Japan when the immigration was cut off for all family members even. So she had to hurry to Seattle in, I think, 1924 when that law became effective. She had already graduated her high school days there. So she came to America to join our family. And I remember so well the day she arrived. She was my half-sister. The fathers were the same. Well, when my father had originally wanted to come to America, he asked his wife to come with him, but she refused, to a strange country and all that. So she was sent home, and my sister was taken care of by my grandmother. And then when she came, that day that she was going to arrive, my parents announced to me that my sister was coming. I never knew I had a sister. I was so happy, after having a slew of brothers, to have an older sister. So I could hardly go through school, wait for the school to end. I ran home, and there she was, and we've always gotten along so well, my sister and I. Mm-hmm. So during this time, when my mother took my 4 brothers to Japan, and I was left alone with my father, my sister, who had been attending Columbia University in New York City, had to leave her school to come and take care of me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you something funny. About 2 years ago, she passed away, and I went to see her before she passed away, and she says one of the things she remembered about having to take care of me was that she had to make lunch for me, a sack lunch. And she says every day she made peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And she said for 2 years she had to do that for me. And I never grumbled. I was so grateful to have something to eat in it. But she remembered that, and we laughed and laughed about things like that. Mm-hmm. And so my 3 brothers, 3 brothers were left there. And the reason the 4th brother had to come home was my grandmother said he was too mischievous for her to take care of. So my 2nd brother and I were reared together. I see. And the rest stayed in Japan. Mm-hmm. But the one next to me, as soon as he graduated high school, he came to Seattle to join us. But the other 2 remained in Japan till all through the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm.
And when did your mother return to Seattle? Because she had taken the boys over for their education.
Mm-hmm. She stayed there almost a year and a half, I think, something like that. And she came back, and now the family was divided. But
right. And when your mother came back, then did your sister continue to stay on?
Yes.
With you?
Then we found out she had married a student from Japan who had graduated from Columbia University. And so my father says, call him. He can help run the dairy. Oh. So he came, but he was Japan-born. His only years in America was when he was in school, New York City. So I think he had a hard time adjusting to the small Japanese community that we have here.
In Seattle, right?
Mm-hmm. But it was okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he helped eventually run the dairy. Right?
Oh yes, he modernized the dairy. collected all the old debts that my father had put behind him. He went after them, things like that. But he too went to Japan before war, because he knew that war was imminent, which is another thing I think we were caught, so many of us were caught unaware of, that there would be such a disastrous war. But my brother-in-law knew. He took everything and went to Japan. And so my sister and he were separated for the rest of their lives, because my brother-in-law died soon after war ended.
And your sister had remained in the United States. I see. Okay. We'll get back to that, but as you're growing up then, you had said that most of your close friends were really the Japanese Americans in the International District.
Yes.
And that it was, your close friends really were not a mixed group of ethnically mixed from school or that kind of thing, but mostly Japanese Americans. Because of that, what kinds of things did the community provide for you youngsters as you're growing up?
Well, for instance, I went to Bailey got to school when it opened up, a brand new school for us, and we were so happy. And we had a wonderful principal named Ada J. Mahan. Her first priority was that we become good American citizens. She, wanted us to. So every so often we'd have these assemblies where we'd have flag salutes and all that. But she was a wonderful principal, and all the teachers there too. Because I remember when I first went to school, I couldn't speak a word of English. See, we were brought up in a Japanese home where my mother especially, she lived here over 50 years and she never did learn English. But my father had to learn English because of his business. But my mother never did. So here I went to school, no older brothers or sisters to help us, in the English language, and yet we got by. So we must have had very dedicated teachers who looked after us. I was able to skip 2 grades and go into high school earlier than most of my friends. So that meant that the teachers really helped us. And the Japanese community, as I said, I was born in a house right around the corner from the church, and Nipponkan. Nipponkan Hall was where the Japanese all gathered for entertainment. And my mother, that was her only, form of leisure and all that. So every Saturday night she would drag us all. Because various organizations in the community would have their shibai or their odori or,
And shibai is a play?
Classical drama. Amateurs, of course, all the people, but we enjoyed watching. And then there were church organizations, Boy Scout groups, Buddhists had the Lotus group, where they had fundraisers by having entertainments, talent shows like that. Oh my, we really...
And did you participate in the odori, which is the dance?
No,
Japanese
I never went
dancing?
to classes like that. And but Japanese language school had a program every year, and we had to practice for that. So for that, I was on the stage. And then we had what we call a girls' club, a social group, and we had entertainment. Most of the organizations had entertainment for which they prepared for a whole year, and then we presented them. I don't know how we were, but... But, I must have had a very wonderful set of parents because, for instance, in order to appear in this one entertainment that I remember at Nipponkan, the girls all had to wear black short coats. And we had to go buy it. My mothers couldn't make those things. We had to all have a set. We had big white chrysanthemum pompons here and came all like the rockets out of the stage. But Anyway, it was really a lot of fun, clean fun, where we could meet our friends, but also be entertained by them. And I think we were very fortunate our whole life, although we were centered in Japantown. Barely got to school. I remember just a few Chinese, no black person, no Filipino. We were all Japanese. So I think we ruled the school, really. And so all of our life, we never felt any discrimination. We would go to school together with friends, leave the school with friends, but they're all Japanese. We walked 2 blocks down from Biligat to school and go to the Japanese language school for another 1 hour and a half. And so we're studying all the time. No chance to get into mischief. Right. Then also during our growing up days, we had what we call the Courier League.
Could you tell us more about that? What is
it? Was Jimmy Sakamoto and his wife had started this English written newspaper. Once a week it came out. He was a pugilist, and he got blinded when he was boxing in New York City, so he had to come home. This was his home, Seattle. And he had married a lady from Tottori, from the same kin, so we know them quite well. And they started this Courier League in conjunction with their newspaper. And the league consisted of football games, baseball, basketball, according to the season. And a man named George Ishihara, who was Jimmy's friend, helped in organizing this tremendous group of hundreds of kids, in various activities. Like, for instance, just a basketball team. It wasn't just one team representing one church. Like the Baptist church had basketball team, boys basketball team, that the top ones were called High Stars, and we had Meteors, Sparklers, all those things up in the sky. They were all made up of different age groups. And then we had also what we call the girls' team. And the girls' team, I joined them when I was 15, and I have a picture of them. We had Mac Kaneko as our coach, and his wife-to-be at that time designed our uniform, I guess. And we had to have our mothers, make it for us. It's trunks, no bloomers. By that time, we were able to wear trunks with a little bib on it. Isn't that an odd uniform? But we got to be in the girls' basketball team, league. The WWGs used to get a lot of championship, and even in the year that I was in.
What does WWG stand for?
Oh my, you have to be a Baptist. Worthwhile Girls of the Worldwide Guild, working with God for the whole world's good. See, it's all WWG.
Yes. Excellent.
So, and then the boys, they were in the league. And so many of the men now tell me, if it weren't for these teams where they had to play so hard, work so hard, practice, it got them out of mischief. They didn't have time for any mischief. So a lot of people were influenced by the league.
The church was the center, it seems as though, for many of your activities. Besides sponsoring the girls' basketball team on which you had played, what other kinds of things were you involved with at the church?
Oh, at the church. From the time we were little, we had a very good pastor, the original pastor who founded the church, Reverend Okazaki. He had about four girls and 2 boys, I think. And the oldest of his girls was a graduate of the Baptist Missionary Training School. You know, after the missionary, she she got to know the missionary from Baptist Missionary Training Schools, who, by the way, was a graduate back in 1918. And so the minister's daughter, she had gone there too. When she came back, she gathered us teenage girls, and we learned how to sew, do hemming, and things like that, how to cook American food, because our parents, my mother, didn't know how. And like my mother, as I said, she was so liberal. I learned something at this cooking class, and the next week I would have it at home. So she would allow me to buy these things, like pork chops, how to do pork chops, or Spanish rice, or things like that. She was willing to try. My mother allowed me to try these things. So besides sewing and cooking, then we played gym. We were out in the gym. That's how we got active in the basketball activities. Japanese Baptist Church was the only Japanese church which had a regular gymnasium. The rest of them were either in portables or built later. That was different. But Japanese Baptist Church was built back in I think they moved to this new place about 1927, and they already had a gym. So that's why I think the Baptist people were able to use that gym lots more than other church members. So we were very fortunate in that. Well, in conjunction with the Japanese Baptist Church, they also had what they call Fujin home, Japanese, women's home. And they were started by Mrs. Okazaki, the wife of the pastor, who we were all under the head of our church office was in New York City. So she wrote to them and said, here are all these picture brides coming in from Japan. Temporarily, they have to have housing. Some of them didn't want to get married to the fellow whose picture they had, things like that. They refused, so they had to have lodging. And so the Baptist Home Mission Society funded the building that was built about 2 blocks away from the Japanese Baptist Church on East Spruce. And that became the haven for so many troubled people. I remember when I was growing up, if there were families where the husband would die and the wife would be left with all these little children, well, they could always go to Fujin home to stay there and eat there. And quite a few were there. I know one family that came in from Montana. The father had died, and the widow brought all those children to Fujin home. So that was another wonderful thing that...
like a temporary shelter.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And even after war, it became a place where they could stay. Mm-hmm. So Fujin home was a wonderful place for us.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
How did you, as a teenager, again, you talked about all these different and various kind of projects that the Baptist Church had sponsored. I'm sure you probably were also there for the religious kinds of things. Could you tell us anything more about the gathering? Did you have conventions or conferences? Or
Yes, before war, we had what we call the Young People's Christian Conference, and that's YPCC, patterned after a group that started it in California 2 years prior to our starting it here. We had about 300 delegates that came in from Spokane, Yakima, Wapato, Vancouver, Portland, and we would gather every year the weekend of Thanksgiving. So the conference was Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we had to house them. And so different homes would open up, and they would have guests like that. And here we were only about 15 or 16 when we started all this, and the nerve that we had.
And yet, I think back in terms of the kind of leadership that you exhibited even at that time then.
Well, it developed us. It really helped, otherwise, who knows what I might have happened.
Gave you the confidence, gave you the opportunity to try out some of these things.
And we had meetings at various American churches, especially up at the University District, because they had great big churches where they could accommodate all of this. But I remember particularly our last YPCC before we were put into camp. That was a fall or Thanksgiving time of 1940. Because war started at 41, didn't it?
Correct.
40, and Kurusu, the ambassador from Japan, was in Washington, D.C. trying to negotiate. Well, it was right before war, so it's 1941.
November of 1941.
And we were so naive. We thought we passed a resolution, send a wire to Washington, D.C., please, don't have any war. We are for peace, and these are these young people meeting who are praying for your, success. We did send telegrams like that, but alas, it didn't.
But the fact that you young people took that stand and actually acted on it.
Oh yes, we did.
As by now, we're getting close to your graduation. You graduated in 1932 from, was it Franklin High School?
Franklin High School. And actually, my mother and father came to the graduation. Even though my mother couldn't understand English, and we had all those speeches, valedictorian, salutatorian speeches and all. They sat through it all. And I guess it was because I was the first child of theirs that graduated high school, which was quite an accomplishment, I guess, in their eyes. And then for my graduation gift, they sent me to Japan for my first trip on a boat. We traveled 2 weeks on the boat to get to Yokohama. And those days, we could graduate from high school midterm. So I graduated in January. And by February, I was going to Japan all by myself. But my father was already there, see? So I was supposed to meet him in Yokohama. When we got to Yokohama, it was pitch dark. I couldn't see anything. So I leaned over and I said, "Papa," and then my father says, "Hoi, oi," or something like that, and I recognized his voice, and we found each other in the pitch dark.
And this is from the ship that you're yelling?
Yeah, when it docked. Well, I didn't know what else to do.
Oh, what a relief it must have been for you to
Yes, and so he and I and my brother, who was still in, I guess he's still in high school, but anyway, we went on a tour of all Japan, all over. Walked all over on the buses and trains and boats. So I got back a couple of days before graduation exercises. And my girlfriend told me what to do. And graduated.
Isn't that wonderful? What a wonderful graduation present to
I
be
know.
able to go to
I
Japan.
really enjoyed being there. At that time I was very naive, so didn't know much about the impending war, because already there were women folks saying goodbye to their sons because the Manchurian incident had started and they were going into North China, things like that.
So upon your return then in 1932, June or thereabouts, so that you can make the graduation, then what did you do after graduation?
Well, as I told you, there's a connection with the Baptist Missionary Training School because of these two women who influenced my life. And then also, a very close friend of mine had a sister-in-law of the pastor's daughter was going there right at that time. She was a senior when I was a freshman. And I wanted to go to the same school, and my mother said, "Okay, as long as you write to me every week." So they sent me there on a train. And but since I was with this Japanese girl for 1 year, my mother must have felt that I would behave.
How was it very unusual at that time to send a daughter off? I mean, number one, to go to college, but number two, to go so far away to college.
In Depression time, too.
Right.
So this is right in Depression. But as I said, whatever I would say, my parents never opposed me. Isn't that something?
That is amazing.
So, I'm very grateful to them. Then in my last year, my father died of cancer, so I had to come home because my mother said, you've got to start working at the dairy and protect the interests of your brothers. So I started working under my sister. Forgot. Closing it up.
Can I go back to the Chicago, the Baptist Missionary Training School? What was your experience there like? Was it a positive one? Did you encounter, this is the first time you've been to a really large city kind of on your own, even though you did have
That's right.
friends.
Mm-hmm. We were the only Japanese. Of course, my girlfriend left after she graduated. And so I was left the other years. I was the only Japanese. But thought nothing of it. They were so open-hearted, and in welcoming me, I really loved it. And during the vacation time, I couldn't come home because it took how many days on the train. That was the only way of transportation. So then the girls would vie for me, come live, stay with us, or come. So I had the choice of going to various states and be accepted. I remember one family, they had a farm at Marengo, Wisconsin. Marengo, anyway. It was a regular farm where I learned how to eat breakfast. Farmer's breakfast. Oh, I thought it was so good. They had mashed potatoes and gravy, for morning. Because the men folks would go out to milk the cows and do their chores, and then they would come back to eat breakfast. And so that's how I learned how to eat biscuits, homemade biscuits and things like that. Another family, one other holiday, lived in southern Illinois, and the mother made all kinds of homemade Christmas candies. Divinity candy, and things I never knew people could make at home. And so everywhere I went, they welcomed me with open arms. So I was lucky all my life where I didn't feel any prejudice. The only time I felt it a little bit was my roommate's brother came into town from Wisconsin, tall fellow, blonde, and he took me out to a theater. Now, of course, we had to travel by the bus. And as we were coming back home, I could see the other passengers, looking at us and talking about us. And I felt for the first time, felt a little bit uneasy. So from then on, I just started dating Japanese boys.
Mm-hmm. But that was the very first time that there was that kind of feeling then, as far as...
Perhaps, or else we were curiosities or something.
Could be.
Because Chicago at that time had only about 300 Japanese, including babies and grandparents. So it's not like it is now.
Right.
So maybe we just aroused their curiosity, especially when the fellow was tall and blonde, so short.
So really, your 3.5 years at the Chicago Baptist Missionary School was really a very positive experience then.
Oh yes, I made many, many friends, and we have an alumni chapter now in Seattle, and we didn't have to graduate the same year, just the fact that we went to the same school, and so which was really good, because in 1960 I was asked to join the board for the executive board for the school, and I served for 4 years. And when I was going to school, it was an undergraduate school. Now it's a graduate school, and moved to Rochester, New York. So I've had that pleasure of going to Chicago and back to Chicago and then on to Rochester, New York.
Right, how wonderful. And during this time, then once you returned to Seattle in, 1935, and then you jumped back into the church, etc., when did you get married?
End of 1936.
Oh.
My husband was already, I had met him in Chicago. That's another thing that I owe to that school or the Baptist. One year, I had a phone call from a friend of mine who was also a member of the Japanese Baptist Church. His name was Min Yamasaki, the well-known world architect. Min Yamasaki. He wasn't an architect yet, but he had graduated from the School of Architecture in University of Washington. And he was on his way to New York City to find a job. So he called me at the school one day, said, let's go out and I want you to meet another Seattle person who is in town. What turned out to be my future husband at that time. Also at that time, Chicago was having the World's Fair of 1933, the summer of 1933 and 34. Well, I think my husband came for the fair of 1934, and so had Min. And I remember meeting him. Well, I had known of the Uno family in Seattle because they were very well known. And Chick, my future husband at that time, had just graduated from Pullman, Washington State, at that time, college. Well, it took him a long time to get his degree because he came from a large family. His father needed help on the farm. He had a poultry farm in a place called Tukwila. And because he had to help his father and then also to earn his way through school, it took him quite a number of years to graduate. So he had graduated and he had come to Chicago to visit the fair, and also he had cousins living in Chicago. So one Saturday night after our prayer meeting, Min and I went up. Min, we called him Tinky. So if you hear somebody say Tinky Yamasaki, that means they're friends from a long, long time ago. And so that's how I met my husband. And Tinky went on to New York to become a famous architect. So I can say at least that this famous architect was also our Baishakunin.
Right. Your go-between, right. So then when you had returned to Seattle, where was Chick at that point?
Oh, he had gone to Japan for 1 year study there, Japanese study, and to also study, to go to judo school there, famous one in Tokyo. And so he was away for the whole almost 2 years before he came back to Seattle. And of course my sister had to have him come to work for us at the White River Dairy. So he became a driver for one of our trucks delivering milk.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
And remember, this is all in the middle of Depression yet.
That's right.
And yet we postponed our honeymoon trip, saved enough money, and then for our honeymoon trip, we went to Portland on a train, took another train out of the city of Portland to Chicago, and then he went on to Michigan to pick up a car, brand new car, came back to meet me in Chicago, and we toured around the whole United States on our honeymoon trip. Took us 6 weeks to go around. And we looked up various friends who had moved out of Seattle to work back east, and also my college friends who were working in different parts of the United States.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's
so
wonderful.
That's how we came home through California and then we started a family after that, and my first daughter was born. And both of us worked in the White River Dairy together. My older sister and myself. And then gradually, as my brothers got through school, then they started working for us. So it was mainly a family corporation until war came by. I started.
Now, prior to, while you were working and you had your first daughter, you were still involved in the church. And I know that you had mentioned in our previous conversation that you had chaperoned a trip to Japan.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about that.
Could you tell us more about that?
We had the WWG Kengakudan group. And these girls, there were 12 of the girls who had graduated high school, but never been to Japan. So I chaperoned this group. And we still had to travel by boat, 2 weeks on the boat. I was seasick for a whole week until the captain sent an officer down to where I was laying in bed and said, "Your girls are running wild all over the boat. Please come and chaperone them." So I reluctantly had to leave my bed. And we went third class at that time to Japan. And third class meant the bottom of their bed was all boards, and they had a small mattress on top of that. And we traveled third class, well, that's all we could afford. But in preparation for this trip, it was very interesting that we got together, the girls got together at least once a week, and we had a principal at Japanese language school, Mr. Nakagawa, and his wife taught us how to eat properly, how to take the chopsticks. You can't just, because it's laying on that thing, how to pick up the chopsticks proper way, how to drink out of your bowl of soup and different procedures. And they also taught us quite a few things about Japan because, as I said, this is the first visit for them. For a whole year prior to our trip. And we raised money, also the girls, in order to go to Japan. But the thing is, we were able to go to Japan on the boat 2 weeks each way, so that meant 4 weeks, plus all the expenses of traveling up and down Japan for only $300. Can you imagine?
Isn't that?
And yet, there are some families who couldn't afford it to send the girls. And to this day, I've heard especially from 2 girls who couldn't make it, they wanted to come. They said, they regretted that they couldn't come with us. Because as soon as we landed in Yokohama, we started traveling all over. And we visited mainly the Baptist mission fields from Sendai down to Nagasaki. And we traveled by bus, ferries, boats, and trains. No planes at that time. So we left in February and came back in June for only $300.
Isn't that amazing? Now that was in 1940. 1940. Can you tell us a little bit more about the political climate, or did you, as visitors from the United States, feel anything or hear
yes.
anything?
The war in China had already started, and so the girls, we taught the girls how to sing various patriotic songs. I don't think we knew what the words were, but at least we memorized it and got the tune. And as soon as we landed, we were taken to naval hospitals and army hospitals. These young boys, they had come back wounded. And when we would enter the room, they were set up. And we told them, you don't have to sit up. Just lay down again. And they would lay down. And we would sing these patriotic songs. And at that time, Japan was celebrating their 2,600th year of reign. So they had one song called Niseng That's all I can remember. We sang all over. But it was on that trip that we would meet various students. And they would ask us, why is it that the United States is preparing for war against us? And we were shocked because I didn't think that the United States newspapers had anything about how bad Japan was. Eventually we'd have to fight with them. But in Japan, they said, no, it's the United States that's so anxious to fight with us. So we kept denying it. But on the trains and all, various students would come up to us and start talking to the girls. Of course, the girls were all young and pretty, and so the boys were anxious to talk to them.
But that was then the first inkling you had that maybe there was trouble, real trouble between the United States and Japan.
After visiting those soldiers, and then what I didn't realize that we were being followed by the police, and they would interview us at the hotel and things like that.
I mean, the Japanese police would interview you in terms of like, what are you doing, or what kinds of questions?
They wanted to know why we were there, what we thought of Japan. The girls were very willing to talk, so we were put into the newspaper with quotes. So the main thing was that they were very happy to go to the homeland or their parents. But they always said, no, we're Americans, but we're very happy to come here. So they really opened it, their hearts to us there too. And although we were termed as gaijins, foreigners, never Japanese. And one of the girls in the group had a cousin who was an injured army man, came in his uniform when we were visiting his parents there in Nagasaki. And the sad part of it, he was a spitting image of this girl's brother. Just looked just like that, each other. Well, the girl's brother died in Africa, but I don't know what happened to his cousin there in Japan. So that's how we traveled up and down Japan. Right. And only 2 girls came back with me to Seattle. And the rest of them stayed behind, wanted to, stay there for a while. And quite a few were caught in Japan.
So as they stayed behind to maybe visit with family or whatever else, they stayed long enough so that they could not return?
No. One of the girls, she was on that last boat that left Japan, going through Hawaii. And then all of a sudden the boat had turned around and she landed back in Yokohama. And she had such a hard time because she had been living with her uncle, but they too were running short of food. So she talks about going way into the countryside to dig up the earth to see what kind of edible things there were. But she was able to come back after war ended.
Well, as you can try to bring yourself back to 1941, December 7th, can you describe how you heard about the bombing of Pearl Harbor and what your immediate feelings were?
Well, of course, we couldn't believe it. At least we knew where Pearl Harbor was, but it was such a shock. We were really shocked. The same day, my brother was supposed to announce his engagement to get married, and so since we had made the arrangements, we had dinner, but nobody talked. We left as soon as we could, and as we were coming down this Chinese restaurant, which was on Main Street, run by Japanese but Chinese food, and as we came down this stairway to the street level, the FBI people were already there and picked up about 2 of our friends who had been dining in the same restaurant. But they're all ready. And they were American citizens, but because their company had been dealing with Japan on the sale of steel. Remember when Seattle used to have trolleys that ran in the middle of the street, and on those railings they were able to sell. So for that, they were picked up. But it's when evacuation orders came through that we were just couldn't believe our ears. For days, we could hear commentators, especially from California, who began saying, we're going to put those Japs behind camp, in camp, behind barbed wires. And Chick and I would say, oh, that means our parents, because they're aliens. They couldn't become citizens. The law forbade them to become citizens. So we're just saying, we'll have to go visit them, not realizing that, my goodness, they meant us too.
Right.
And by that time, let's see, by the time I was in the spring, I was already pregnant and was planning, my baby was second baby was supposed to come in May. And then when our orders came that we have to move in April, my doctor went down to the temporary Camp Harmony, where Puyallup Fair is now being held. Says, where's the hospital? We don't have a hospital. Well, how many thousands of us were leaving Seattle to go to the camp? And he was so horrified, he wrote to the government, and they said, if your patient is in the hospital, then she can stay there, but only as long as she can stay in the hospital. But fortunately, those days, mothers had to stay 2 weeks anyway, even though we wanted to go home. So I was able to stay in the hospital for 2 weeks. But the day that evacuation came for us who were up on Beacon Hill, one family at the First Baptist Church took care of another family from the Japanese Baptist Church. So they had one family who came to the door, helped them pack, and we could carry only what we could carry, take with us. And so I remember this man and his family who had helped my family came to the hospital to tell me that he had helped them get on the bus, that they're safely on their way to Camp Harmony.
So you were in the hospital when the rest of your family was sent to Puyallup. Now, where was Chick at this time, your husband?
He went to camp.
He went to camp. So it was just you and your newborn that remained in the hospital.
As long as I was in the hospital.
Tell me, you had said earlier, too, that you were due in May, and the baby came in April. Did your doctor then arrange for you to have the baby early, or
what happened? Oh, yes. I remember our last meal we had at home. I told you that my father-in-law had a poultry farm. Well, by that time, my father-in-law wasn't with us. My mother had died. Anyway, Chick's brothers were at the farm, and they brought in some chicken, the last chicken that they were going to eat. And they prepared this huge chicken dinner. And I thought, I better ask the doctor if I'm going to be, because I knew I was going to be induced the next morning if I can eat. He says, absolutely not. So all I could do was smell that delicious chicken dinner, which I never did have, and had to go to the hospital the next day. Well, our family was supposed to evacuate on the 29th of April. Was it 29th? Something, yeah. Or the 30th. So the doctor had have the baby induced. They give you this orange cocktail thing, and you drink it. And that started the labor pains eventually. And so the baby was born on the 29th of April, which is also Tenchosets.
What does that mean?
It's the birthday of the emperor, that emperor at that time. So now when I tell my daughter, everybody in Japan is celebrating your birthday, what do I care, It meant nothing to her. So she came on the 29th, and so the family was able to come to the hospital to see the baby. And then they left the very next day. So I guess I was sad. I can't remember too much.
Right, I was going to ask you how you felt knowing that you were left behind.
But, there's a girl in the bed next to me who was crying all day long. So I asked her, our babies were born at the same time. I asked her, what's the matter? She says, well, my husband is in the South Pacific somewhere. So I thought, well, I should be very grateful. She doesn't know where her husband is, but at least I know where my family is, even though they were behind barbed wires. Of course, I didn't know at that time barbed wires and all. At least I knew where they were. So 2 weeks later, then I was able to go to this Fujin home that I told you about, the Japanese women's home, the Baptist group. And I was able to stay overnight. And my husband called me because we were told to take only what we could carry. Well, how can you carry cribs all the simple things we couldn't take. So my husband called and says, order the kettle and pot, well, not pots and pans, but at least he knew we needed a kettle and something to sterilize the baby's bottles and, little things like that. Of course, I couldn't carry the crib there. But he asked me to pick it up, so a friend of mine did.
I see. And then you went on to Puyallup.
And what a scene. It was dusty. And all those women folks had kerchiefs around their head to keep the dust out of their hair. And barbed wire fence. And then there were people outside looking in on the camp as if we were in the zoo, I felt, here we are, and they're looking from the outside. But some of the people who were there on the outside were Japanese people who hadn't evacuated yet, from other sections, from Tacoma and Sumner around there. But those Sundays when those Hagujin people would come by gawking, it was terrible, the feeling of it.
And here you were bringing a brand new baby to this kind of environment. What kind of feelings did you have at that time?
Felt terrible. Couldn't even sterilize her bottles or her formula because we didn't have a kitchen. And so I asked Dr. Suzuki at that time, what shall I do? And he says, give her water. Use the same water and just put the powder in. And well, she survived. Yes. Now she's a mother of 7 children.
Right, so she survived beautifully.
But she's not tall. She's like Alice, So she says it's because she came out 1 month early.
Right.
But don't you think Naomi looks fine now?
Oh, she's beautiful. Absolutely.
And I gave her a biblical name because I thought, well, we needed it at that time.
And does she have a middle Japanese name?
My mother used to call her Naomi. That's Japanese name. Naomi. So. Right.
As you remember back to Puyallup, what do you have any memories, good or bad, that you could recount? Life must have been very, very difficult, and especially with you with children. But we've all heard descriptions of the barracks and that kind of thing. Do you have any memories?
Oh yes. The hot water, we had to share it. Well, Puyallup was divided into 4 sections. We were in the former parking lot in barracks, and each section had 1 laundry room. And we were told that the hot water would come in at 6 o'clock in the morning. So all the mothers were out there in lines. They had various doors that would open, so we'd stand outside the closed doors in the morning with your pail of dirty diapers and your soap scrub board. I never had used those old-fashioned scrub boards before, but. with that. And if you forgot anything in your barrack, then you lose your place in the line. So we had to remember to bring all those things in. And as soon as a door would open, oh, the women would just rush in. And in 5 minutes, hot water would be all gone. But we learned how to wash in the cold water. And she never got sick or anything. We were just very fortunate. And then we had to stand in line, I remember, from the very first for brushing your teeth, or going to the bathroom, stand in line to get into the mess hall. It was all we had to take turns. And it was a lack of privacy, I think, which got to many of us. Well, like a newborn babe, they cry, especially at night, it seemed like. So I would have to get up and walk with her so she wouldn't bother the people down the barracks, because these barracks just had wood partitions that didn't even come up to the ceiling. So about 6 feet high, and then the noise could go all the way down to the barrack. The barracks were divided into about 6 apartments. So after the first night, a lady next to me said, "I would have had a baby just like yours." I said, "What happened?" So she told me the story of how she and her husband were farming people that lived in South Park. But when evacuation, because she was expecting, as I was, they moved into Seattle to be able to go to the doctor and all that. Well, one night, and then we also had curfew, and we had to be in our homes and not out in the street after 8 o'clock, I think it was.
And this was the intervening months between the Pearl Harbor bombing in December and before you were evacuated. There were things like curfew imposed on the entire Japanese community, right? Mm-hmm.
Those of us who had businesses had to hurry up, close up our books and everything, get the money in order, and then rush home.
Because of the curfew?
Yes, and then there was also, you couldn't go beyond so many miles from your home. I forgot what the restriction was. It was during this time that my mother-in-law got sick. And they lived out in Tukwila, as I said. And my father-in-law called, so I told my husband, "Let's get Dr. Suzuki, we're going to go out there." My husband was so scared that we'd be, caught, because Tukwila is more than 5 miles out. But we went anyway. But she had died before we got there. So we had that tragedy before camp. Mm-hmm. And of course, the father-in-law was picked up soon after Pearl Harbor, because he had served as a cavalryman in the Russo-Japanese War. There's a picture of him astride his horse and all that. Very proud of his Japanese citizenship, I guess.
And he was picked up earlier and sent to...
First to Missoula, Montana, but he was put into that immigration station we have on Airport Way. And I remember going there, because I was working at White River Dairy, and it was just a few blocks away from the immigration station, so I would go there and start waving, and somehow somebody must have told him that I was out there on the street, and he'd wave back, and so every day we couldn't talk to each other, but at least we waved to each other.
So he was held incommunicado there for, was it 2 weeks or 3 weeks?
I don't remember.
And then sent to Missoula.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then finally he ended up in Crystal City, Texas. But in camp, I remember that, we didn't get no cribs for the new babies, so that she was allowed a bed with no railings on the side, which meant someone had to be with her all the time. And so my mother had gone to camp. My mother was alive. She was a widow. And my brother, they were assigned another barrack room. So my mother, just before mealtime, would pick up my 4-year-old daughter. The two of them would go to have their meals, and then I would wait till the second shift started, and she'd come back after she got through eating, and then take care of the baby while I would go to the missile. Mm-hmm. So in all this, you could tell that families couldn't eat together. And in the meantime, my husband, who was quite an athletic person, was chosen as athletic director for the whole camp. So he was busy going from camp to, from barrack to, block to block. So he couldn't be with us. So those are the things that I didn't like. That there was a breakup of a family life very easily. No privacy anywhere, with the walls not reaching up. Everybody could hear what's happening down the line.
Mm-hmm. And like you say, the breakdown of the meals and that kind of thing. And I interrupted you. I'd like to go back to, we were talking about curfew, and the neighbor next to you, who had started the story about she would have had a child.
Yes,
just like
and when the baby started to come in Seattle, after midnight or whatever, where he had to stay at home, or he was too frightened to go out and look for a public phone or ask for help from the doctor. And the baby came, and he didn't know what to do as a first child, and it strangled to death, with a cord. Mm-hmm. So I felt so sorry for her, because she could hear my baby crying, and here she was empty-armed now. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
but those are the personal tragedies that occurred because of, these governmental issues.
That's right. Of course, some people would not care about laws and still do, but I guess there are people like that. Like my husband didn't want to go to see his dying mother, because it was beyond the limits. But another thing, when I was pregnant, still continuing that business before we were put into camp, all of our company books were seized because they happened to be in our attorney's office. And of course, the attorney was a Japanese man, all American citizen, who was picked up the first day too, right after Pearl Harbor. So when I went to the government office and said, I'd like to have my books back because I need them. Well, you've got to go to the jail and get an okay from your attorney. Well, here I am, big as ever. He took one look at me and says, oh, we'll get it for you. So I just waited at the office while they got it from me. So they were kind people.
Well, speaking of that time when you had to get those books, and there came a time, we're backing up a little bit before the evacuation. If you could say a little bit about how you had to prepare in closing down your business.
That's right. Well, in the first place, my sister, who was not an American citizen, had all her bank assets frozen, so she didn't have any money. But somehow from the dairy we were able to give her. And then there was a period where she was able to leave Seattle because they had that voluntary evacuation, where you could leave. So she left, she had one daughter with her, and she left for New York City. So that left me with all the disposal of the property. Luckily, we knew this big firm called Ardent Farms, who tried to take some of the things that they could use. But Alpine Dairy, which happened to be in Issaquah, said that they could take over the whole plant, trucks and everything. So he said he would. But when we were in camp, I got a letter from him saying that he had to close up the place because the government did not allow him to increase his business. They were only allowed so much butterfat to each dairy what they had prior to Pearl Harbor. So he couldn't expand because the milk and all, butter and all, were taken over by the government. They didn't want the individual dairies to get rich on it. So there we were without any tenant, so we lost our income there. We gave away practically everything. We had bought new equipment, because business was really getting very good right after Pearl Harbor and up to evacuation time. That announcement came out. Because I understand that the customers of our restaurants and the grocery stores kept telling the owners, don't worry, we're going to keep on being with you. So our business really jumped up. And then Seattle was filling up with outsiders, workers and all. Mm-hmm.
So when you had leased the business to Issaquah before you had actually left for camp.
Mm-hmm.
And then once you got to camp, it seemed as though that you got another letter saying that you can't do it.
No.
And so at that point then, they just closed the doors for the time being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Closed everything at a loss. Mm-hmm. But which we never recovered from, really. Mm-hmm. But
right. Eventually, what did happen to that business, to the White River? Was it just temporarily closed when the Issaquah Alpine Dairy couldn't make a go of it? And then?
Then I guess we were out of camp by then. I got a letter from our attorney. Our attorney took care of everything. Said there's a good buyer, a refugee from Europe, who's got cash and would like to buy your building and land. But for $10,000. Well, do you know that the same land now is occupied by a great big building, and the person who developed the project had to pay $350,000 for what we sold for $10,000. So I told Wayne, who bought the place, I said, "Oh, you got cheated." He laughed. He said he was offered $375,000 anyway for the place, but we sold it for only $10,000.
Right.
Because when we received the letter, we didn't know whether we could come home or anything. Nobody knew what our future was. We thought we could never be back here. So 10,000 is better than nothing.
Right. And there was a lot of uncertainty at that time.
Oh,
and like you
yes.
say, you just took what you could then at that time.